كلمته كانت واضحة، مثل ما أنا دعمت هيدا بدي أدعم إيران.
فتحنا أبواب اللهيب، أبواب جهنم على البلد.
Good afternoon. It is Wednesday, August 28th. I'm Yumna Naufal, and these are today's headlines. UN Chemical Weapons Investigation Team continues to probe into a chemical attack allegation in Syria. Al-Qaeda in the West versus Iran and Hezbollah. Regarding Syria, we speak to analyst Ilhan Tanir live from Washington to get some answers. And fugitive cleric Ahmed al-Asir calls on Christians in Lebanon to be wary, claiming the next bombings may target their areas. Britain and the United States are finalizing plans to launch punitive strikes at the end of this week against the regime of Bashar al-Assad over the use of chemical weapons near Damascus last week. However, the coalition of the willing is being staunchly opposed by Iran and its allies, which have vowed to take retaliatory measures if Syria is attacked. UN chemical weapons investigators crossed Syria's front line into rebel-held territory for a second visit to the scene of a poisonous gas attack that has triggered Western plans for intervention. U.S. President Barack Obama and his European and Middle East allies have already blamed President Bashar al-Assad for last week's killing of hundreds of civilians. But the UN experts who were first allowed to cross the front line by Assad's forces on Monday are still engaged in gathering evidence. The aim, governments say, is to punish Assad's use of banned weapons, but not, the White House insists, to impose regime change and end a conflict now entering its third year. But Russia and China, set on blocking UN backing, warn what they see as an illegal assault on a sovereign state that could inflame a war. This comes as U.S. Vice President Joe Biden says there is no doubt that the Syrian regime has used chemical weapons against its own people.
Chemical weapons have been used. Everyone acknowledges their use. No one doubts that innocent men, women, and children have been the victims of chemical weapons attacks in Syria. And there is no doubt who is responsible for this heinous use of chemical weapons in Syria: the Syrian regime. President Obama's direction, all of us and his national security team have been in close touch with our foreign counterparts. The President believes, and I believe, that those who use chemical weapons against defenseless men, women, and children should and must be held accountable.
Syrian President Bashar al-Assad faces not just retribution from neighboring countries and the West, but from Al-Qaeda. The Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant said it was launching an operation called Volcano of Revenge that would strike Syrian security forces in Damascus. A spokesman for British Prime Minister David Cameron said he and Obama spoke on Tuesday and had no doubt of Assad's guilt. Russia has made it clear it will not back any UN Security Council resolution of the kind, which has given international legal cover to some previous wars, including the NATO bombing of Libya 2 years ago. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov told UN Syrian envoy Lakhdar Brahimi that attacking Syria would destabilize the country and the region. His sentiments were echoed by Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who said the U.S. action would be a disaster for the region. And on the line, live from Washington, D.C., is Ilhan Tanir, D.C. correspondent for the Turkish newspaper Vatan Daily and the Postat 2012 Weekly. Ilhan, can you hear me?
Yes, I do.
Ilhan, is Turkey willing to provide strategic support for an intervention from the U.S.?
Yes, actually Turkey has been expressing its willingness to help to either
أنظار العالم كله تترقب
coalition in any way. And in recent news, it looks like Turkey is going to open some of its air bases, whether in the west of Turkey or near near the border of Syria in Diyarbakir today. There are other news showing that some of the Turkish F-16 fighter jets now being relocated to Diyarbakir, which is very close to the Syrian border.
But why is Turkey supporting the United States? What's in it for Turkey?
Well, the Turkish Prime Minister and top officials began calling Assad to leave the power almost 2 years ago, and since then increasingly helping the Syrian rebels against Assad. And basically there is no relation left between the capitals, and Turkey would like to see Assad to go, and it's ready to help in any way.
Well, speaking of Assad going, as you just said, at his daily press briefing on Tuesday, White House chief spokesman Jay Carney told reporters, "I want to make clear that the options that we are considering are not about regime change." So if they're not about regime change, what is the purpose of this intervention?
Exactly. This is one of the discussions right now in Washington. It looks like there are still two options. One is that it's going to be very limited, just like we have seen Israeli strike inside Syria, and many critics argue that this kind of a very limited strike would not do enough to deter the Assad regime, but there are still other rumors, I could say, that these strikes could be a little deeper and could,
So they're looking to weaken the Syrian regime. Is that what you're saying? For preventive measures, perhaps?
Yes, but I mean there's an option that if U.S.-led coalition takes a harder stance and aim to degrade Assad command and control facilities, and especially hit the runways for the airfields, many people believe that might hit Assad very hard.
Okay, well, can we expect a retaliation from Iran that has been warning against such intervention?
Well, I don't think we will see direct response from Iran, but that could be the proxies of Iran, such as Hezbollah to Israel, or
so not Iran directly, but we could expect Hezbollah retaliating by firing on Israel?
That is the expectation from Israeli side, and there are some discussions in Washington as well.
But there are no, okay. China's official Xinhua news agency says that the Iraq war 10 years ago was started by U.S. allegations of weapons of mass destruction, which turned out to be false. Do you think Syria could be another Iraq? Because they don't have evidence yet that it is the regime that is responsible. They're speculating and they say they're almost sure, but they don't have evidence from the UN inspectors on the ground.
Yes. The U.S. administration stated that they're going to put out the information, whatever the evidence they have, next day or two. But at the same time, we know that in the middle of June, U.S. already expressed and said that they have enough evidence that Syria used chemical weapons and it crossed the red line. I do believe that the U.S. has enough evidence this time, and there are countless of videos.
Well, what are they waiting to? Why are they waiting for to make it open to the public?
I don't know.
Okay.
I think they are just trying to put them all together in a basic language.
Okay. My last question is, Robert Fisk, the Middle East correspondent for The Independent, he wrote, if Barack Obama decides to attack the Syrian regime, he has ensured for the very first time in history that the United States will be on the same side as Al-Qaeda. So what can you tell us about that?
Yes, actually, I had a friend in Syria. I was just talking yesterday, He's one of the activists, and he was telling me that the general expectation in Syria that among the opposition in Aleppo, that U.S. is going to hit both the Al-Qaeda targets at the same time the Assad regime's targets. So this is a different scenario that we could see both sides to be bombed.
But the United States is on the side of Al-Qaeda in terms of wanting to weaken Assad. They're both on the same side, and it is basically indirectly assisting Al-Qaeda by intervening in this way. Am I correct?
Yes, and I think this is one of the strategic mistakes that the U.S. has made by not helping enough to moderate opposition. The Al-Qaeda and affiliated groups have been growing in Syria over a year now.
So what do you expect from this intervention?
Yes, I do expect U.S.-led forces are going to strike in Syria, I believe, either before or over the weekend.
And what do you expect?
I think it's going to be limited strikes, and I do believe strongly that it is still under discussion whether U.S. is going to go and to damage runways and other facilities of the regime, or it's going to be very symbolic, or it's going to also hit the runways and
I know, but everybody's talking about it being limited, but even a limited operation could have very large consequences. Do you agree?
Yes, definitely. We don't know how this is going to escalate after the U.S. and the coalition are striking Syria.
Okay, well, I guess only time will tell. We'll be back. Thank you so much, Mr. Ilhan Tanir, live from Washington, D.C., correspondent for the Turkish newspaper Vatan Daily. Coming up next, at least 40 people killed in a string of bombings in Baghdad, Iraq. More on this when we come back. Welcome back. Fugitive cleric Ahmed Al-Asir warns Christians to be very cautious now that bombings might target their areas. Asir goes on to say in a statement that every prudent person should have come to the conclusion that the Iranian Syrian camp and their tools in the region are behind the attacks in Tripoli. It is important not to cover up the truth, as some have tried to do, thinking that they would be protecting Lebanon from strife, Asir added, saying that he also surmised that attacks similar to the ones in Tripoli and Dahieh might target Christian streets so that Hezbollah leader Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah can prove his words that no city nor sect will remain safe and that the Lebanese must defend themselves against takfiris. A series of bombings kill at least 40 people and wounds 157 across Baghdad. According to police and medical sources, this incident marks the worst wave of violence in Iraq in at least 5 years. A string of car bombs and suicide bombers exploded in the capital city and in a town outside of Baghdad in at least 10 separate locations. The deadliest attack of all struck in the city of Al Dayila neighborhood of southeast Baghdad, killing 7 and wounding 21 others. Most of this morning's bomb targeted Shia majority areas of the Iraqi capital. In recent weeks, Iraqi security forces have carried out wide-ranging operations to combat the unrest, arresting hundreds of alleged fighters and killing dozens of others. Now, for news around the world in brief, toxic water leaks in Fukushima, Japan have been classified as a level 3 serious incident on an international scale by the Nuclear Regulation Authority. According to NRA, this is the gravest warning since the 2011 earthquake and tsunami that sent 3 reactors at the plant into meltdown. The plant operator, TEPCO, struggling to deal with the high volume of contaminated water at the plant, still does not know how long the water may have been leaking and said it was possible it may have reached the Pacific Ocean. Nissan introduces a self-driving car to be available in 2020. The Japanese automaker announced that the autonomous vehicle will not require any input from the driver. The company said it has been researching and developing the design for years in collaboration with top American and Japanese universities. According to Nissan, 93% of all accidents are the result of human error due to inattention, and that by taking the wheel away from the drivers, they hope to be able to reduce the number of car accidents. After spending a quarter-century underwater, Ipiquen town, southwest of Buenos Aires in Argentina, has begun resurfacing in recent years, garnering attention as an emerging tourist attraction. After the town rose up for air, some film crews visited the town to shoot scenes, and media outlets have already started flocking to the area. The water swamping the town contains 10 times more salt than the Atlantic Ocean. Minerals found in the salty water are being used to make skin products and souvenirs, promoting the region's economy. And on that note, we end our bulletin for today. Let me remind you of our headlines. Britain's investigation team continues to probe into the chemical attack allegations in Syria. Al-Qaeda and the West versus Iran and Hezbollah regarding Syria? Well, we spoke to analyst Ilhan Tanir live from D.C. to get some answers. And fugitive cleric Ahmed al-Asir calls on Christians in Lebanon to be wary, claiming the next bombings may target their areas. Those are your Wednesday headlines live on Future Television in Beirut. I'm Yumna Naufal. Have a good night.
كلمته كانت واضحة مثل ما أنا دعمت هيدا بدي أدعم.